I was 9 months pregnant, sleeping in the front seat of my car outside a closed grocery store, trying to ignore the sharp pressure in my stomach and the colder feeling in my chest, the one that came from knowing my own husband had chosen his parents over me. And I kept replaying the moment they threw my suitcase onto the porch, my mother-in-law standing there with that satisfied smile as she said, "You have nothing here," like I was disposable, like I hadn't spent years building a life inside those walls, like I wasn't carrying their grandchild. And I remember gripping the steering wheel that night, whispering to my baby that I'd figure it out somehow, even though I had no plan left, until the next morning, when my phone rang and a calm, professional voice introduced himself as the bank manager and said one sentence that made everything stop. "Mrs. Carter, we need to confirm how you'd like to proceed with the property under your name." And in that moment, sitting in my car with swollen feet and tear-stained cheeks, I realized something they didn't know yet. They hadn't just kicked me out, they had just handed me everything. My name is Emily Carter, I'm 28, married for 3 years, and up until a week before my due date, I thought I had a normal life, or at least a stable one, but looking back now, I realize the cracks were always there, especially when it came to my husband, Daniel, and his parents, who had this quiet, controlling presence over everything we did, from where we lived to how we spent money. And I kept telling myself it was temporary, that once the baby came, things would shift, that Daniel would finally put our family first, but instead, everything got worse, especially after we moved into what I was told was his parents' house, a place they constantly reminded me I was lucky to live in, like I was some kind of guest instead of a wife and soon-to-be mother, and I stayed quiet longer than I should have, ignoring the comments, the tension. The way my mother-in-law would walk into rooms and act like she owned not just the house, but me, but what none of them knew, what I had never told anyone, not even Daniel, was that the house they used to control me was never actually theirs. The truth is, I didn't hide it to be manipulative, I hid it because of something my grandmother told me years ago, back when she first helped me invest in property after I landed my first stable job. She always said, "Never hand over your security just because you trust someone," and at the time, I thought it sounded extreme, but I followed her advice anyway, which is how I quietly became the legal owner of the house Daniel believed his parents bought for us, because in reality, the down payment came from my savings and my grandmother's support, and the mortgage was set up under my name for tax reasons, while Daniel's parents only acted as intermediaries during the purchase process, something they conveniently let him misunderstand. And I never corrected it because, early in our marriage, things felt easier that way, less conflict, less ego, but over time, that silence started to cost me, especially when his mother, Linda, began using the house as leverage in every argument, reminding me it wasn't mine, telling me I should be grateful, pointing out that if I ever stepped out of line, I could be replaced just as easily, and Daniel never really defended me, he'd just sigh or tell me to let it go, like my dignity was optional. And when I got pregnant, I thought things would finally change, but instead, Linda became even more controlling, criticizing everything from what I ate to how I planned to raise the baby, even going as far as telling me she'd be more involved than most grandmothers, which didn't feel like love, it felt like a warning. And the breaking point came one evening when I overheard her telling Daniel that I was becoming too dependent and that it might be better if I spent some time away to learn my place. And instead of shutting it down, he hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know, because a few days later, after a small argument about something as trivial as dinner, Linda escalated it into a full confrontation, accusing me of disrespect, of ingratitude, and then, without any real warning, she told me to pack my things and leave. And when I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to stop it, to say something, anything, he just stood there, avoiding my eyes, and said quietly, "Maybe it's best for now," like I was a problem to be removed, not his wife carrying his child. And in that moment, something inside me broke, but I didn't argue, I didn't scream, I just packed a single suitcase while Linda watched with folded arms. And when I stepped outside, she closed the door behind me like it was final, like I had no way back, and the only thing louder than the sound of that door shutting was the silence from the man who was supposed to choose me. I didn't drive far that night because I honestly didn't know where to go, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as the reality sank in. I was 9 months pregnant, exhausted, and suddenly homeless, and the worst part wasn't even the physical discomfort. It was the disbelief that Daniel hadn't come after me, hadn't even texted to check if I was okay, like I had already been erased from his life. And I remember pulling into the dimly lit parking lot of a grocery store because it felt safer than an empty road. Adjusting my seat as far back as it would go, trying to breathe through the tightness in my stomach that I prayed wasn't early labor, whispering to myself that this was temporary, that I just needed one night to figure things out, but that night stretched endlessly. Every sound making me jump, every hour reminding me how alone I really was, and by morning, my body ached, my phone battery was nearly dead, and I still hadn't heard a word from Daniel or his family, which told me everything I needed to know about where I stood, so I dragged myself into the store restroom, trying to look somewhat presentable, splashing cold water on my face and staring at my reflection, barely recognizing the woman looking back at me, and that's when my phone rang, the screen lighting up with an unknown number, and for a second, I almost ignored it, assuming it was just another spam call, but something made me answer, and the voice on the other end was calm, professional, almost too composed for the chaos I was living in. He introduced himself as Mr. Reynolds from the bank and asked if I was available to discuss my property, and the moment he said that, my chest tightened because I instantly knew which property he meant, the one I hadn't thought about in months, the one tied to everything Daniel's family believed they controlled, and I stepped outside the store, my heart racing as he continued, explaining that there had been multiple inquiries and unauthorized discussions regarding the house, and they needed my direct confirmation on how to proceed moving forward, and I remember gripping my phone tighter as he said, "Mrs. Carter, as the sole legal owner, your approval is required before any decisions can be made," and for a moment, everything around me went quiet, like the noise of the parking lot, the stress, the fear, it all faded into the background, because in that instant, something shifted inside me, something steady and undeniable, and it hit me that while they thought they had power over me, while they believed they could throw me out and control my life, they had no idea that every single thing they were standing on legally belonged to me, and for the first time since that door slammed in my face, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what they had just handed back to me without even realizing it. I didn't rush back to the house right away, and that was intentional, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting to them, I was thinking clearly, strategically, and I told the bank manager I wanted everything documented, every inquiry, every attempt they made to access or control the property without my consent, and his tone shifted slightly, like he understood there was more going on than a simple ownership question, and he assured me they would flag the account and require only my authorization moving forward, which gave me something I hadn't felt in months, control, and instead of driving back to beg or argue, I checked into a modest hotel for a couple of nights, ignoring the guilt creeping in about spending money when I had a baby on the way, because deep down, I knew this wasn't an expense, it was a reset, and that evening, as I sat on the edge of the bed with swollen feet and a quiet room for the first time in days, I started making calls, first to a lawyer my grandmother had once recommended, someone experienced in property and family disputes, and when I explained everything, from the purchase structure to being thrown out days before my due date, there was a pause on the other end before he said, very clearly, "Emily, they have no legal right to remove you from that home," and hearing that out loud did something to me, it replaced the lingering doubt with certainty, and over the next 24 hours, we put a plan in motion, one that didn't involve confrontation or emotion, but facts, documentation, and timing, because my lawyer advised me not to show up unannounced, not to give them a chance to twist the situation, but instead to let the law speak first, and 2 days later, a formal notice was delivered to the house, outlining my ownership, revoking any assumed authority they believed they had, and requiring immediate compliance or legal action. And I can only imagine the moment they opened that envelope, the confusion, the disbelief, the sudden realization that the narrative they had built, that I was dependent, replaceable, powerless, was completely false, and I didn't have to imagine for long. Because that same evening, my phone started blowing up, first Daniel, then his mother, then multiple missed calls back to back, but I didn't answer right away. I let them sit with it, let them feel even a fraction of the uncertainty they had forced on me. And when I finally picked up, it wasn't emotional, it wasn't angry, it was calm, steady, and completely different from the version of me they thought they knew, because for the first time, I wasn't asking for a place in that house. I was deciding who deserved to stay in it. When I finally answered Daniel's call, there was a panic in his voice I had never heard before, like the ground beneath him had shifted overnight, and he started talking fast, asking what the notice meant, saying there had to be some kind of mistake, that his parents were confused, and I let him speak, I let him unravel, because for once, I wasn't the one trying to explain myself, and when he finally paused, I said one sentence that changed everything between us: "There is no mistake, Daniel. The house is mine." And the silence that followed was heavier than any argument we had ever had, because in that moment, every assumption he had leaned on, every time he let his parents disrespect me, every second he chose their version of reality over mine, it all collapsed at once, and he tried to recover, tried to say we could work this out, that I didn't have to take it this far, but I stopped him, because this wasn't sudden, this wasn't impulsive. This was the result of every moment he stayed silent while I was being pushed out of my own life, and later that day, I returned to the house, but not alone, my lawyer was with me, along with a local officer to ensure everything remained civil. And the look on Linda's face when she opened the door wasn't anger, it was shock, pure, unfiltered shock, like she was seeing me for the first time, not as someone she could control, but as someone she had completely underestimated, and she immediately started talking. Trying to shift the narrative, saying there had been a miscommunication, that I had overreacted, but the documents in my lawyer's hand said otherwise, and for once, she had nothing to hold over me, no leverage, no authority, and as we stepped inside, I felt something settle in my chest, not revenge, not even satisfaction, just clarity, and I made it simple. I told them they had two options: leave voluntarily within a legally reasonable timeframe, or face formal eviction proceedings, and the room went quiet again, but this time, it wasn't confusion, it was realization, and Daniel tried one last time, stepping closer, lowering his voice, saying we were a family, that we had a baby coming, as if those words could undo everything. But I looked at him and saw the truth clearly for the first time, not the man I married, but the man who watched me get thrown out and did nothing, and I calmly told him that being a family requires choosing each other, something he had already failed to do. And that night, I didn't leave the house again, they did. A week later, I gave birth to my daughter in a quiet hospital room, surrounded not by chaos or control, but by peace, and for the first time in months, I felt safe, truly safe, knowing that no one could take away the life I had fought to protect. And Daniel did show up, but not as my husband, just as someone who finally understood too late what he had lost, and I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I just set boundaries and kept them, because some lessons don't come with second chances. And as for Linda, the woman who once told me I had nothing, she left that house with boxes in her hands and no power left to hold over anyone, and the silence she used to weaponize against me became the same silence she had to sit with herself. And now, every time I walk through that front door, holding my daughter in my arms, I'm reminded of the night I slept in my car believing I had lost everything, when in reality, that was the moment I took it all back. And if you've ever been made to feel powerless in your own life, don't forget, sometimes the truth you stay quiet about is the very thing that will set you free when it matters most. So if this story hit you, make sure you like, subscribe, and share, because karma always finds its way back.